spend enough time around esports, around checking out people's vlogs or interviews with players, or even listening to the way people talk about the time they've spent in esports or their future of esports or what they want esports to become. And one of the most overused, at this point almost hackneyed and kind of cliched terms that you'll hear is the word passion thrown around. And it'll be like, oh, I'm so passionate about esports. Esports is my passion. Esports is the thing that makes me want to get up in the morning and go out there and do X, Y, and Z. And oh, I love esports. Esports is the best. Oh, esports is the thing I'm most passionate about in life. It's the thing it's gonna be the future, man. It's the best. And this term, this word, it'll just be thrown around by everyone you hear, by casters, commentators, that is, by professional players, by fans. Everyone wants you to know that they're passionate and that's what their main thing is, their passion. And listen, it's not about whether they're hardworking or whether they're good at what they do and all the rest. Passion supersedes all. This is the super term that if you're passionate, then everyone's on board with what you're doing and you're a great guy and we're all in this together. And what's weird about this is this always makes me a little uncomfortable, this overuse of the term and people going out of their way to just let you know that, listen, I'm passionate about esports. Esports is my passion. It's the best thing in my, you know what? I love esports. It's so important to me. When some of these people you barely even know very well. And I just as a general principle in life, I always get a little bit suspicious whenever anyone is going to great lengths to convince me of something. When they don't just want to put the points out there and let them stand, or they don't want to say, hey, here's the thing here, and let me draw my own conclusions. They're going, and you see, and that shows how passionate I am. And I am passionate. You know, it's the most important thing. Listen, I know you don't know me, but the main thing you got to know about me is that I'm passionate about this. Esports is well, it's all I'm about. As soon as someone starts to do that, I get very skeptical. I get very suspicious of it. And I start to think, what motivation does this person have for going so hard at doing this? Whether that's a politician trying to sell you on some policy and what he's all about and what he stands for, or whether that's a salesman trying to actually sell you something literally like a product, and this is so good in this particular way. Because in general, as a life principle, and think about this when you're going about life, things which are really good, to a degree, don't have to be sold. Things that are really good, all you do is let people know what the good features are and the value for money or its value as an object, as a concept, and what's great about it. And once you let them know, they will just see what's innate. It's inherent that that's good. And now you've just told me some of the basic things. I understand why it's good and I understand its value. When someone has to trick you or skew things in a certain way or oversell aspects of it or hype things up in a really bizarre way where maybe putting too much emphasis on there, too much energy and too much, now I'm getting a little bit worried. And so I want to address this thing of passion, because I definitely think there are really passionate people and that this is what drives people. And I think motivation and passion, these things can be interchangeable, and they are. A lot of what has made esports come from just being cool games to big tournaments to people spend their whole lives in it. It's coming from passion. It's coming from motivation. But what's some of the motivations and reasons as to why people would be going so overboard with this passion concept? I think often it comes from a place of wanting some validation, some kind of external validation. And so by telling people, by trying to convince them that you're so passionate, you're showing them that, listen, you're really into something. You're hardcore. You're not just like the random pleb guy who's just a little bit into it and he likes it here. No, I'm different from him. I'm really passionate about this. This is my passion in life. They want to show that they're different from other people like that. They want to show that this is a unique hobby, this is a unique job, this unique interest. This sets them up as a personality. They're not just like anyone. They've got a unique thing they're into. Oh, you're into that sort of. I'm into esports. Oh, you don't know about esports? Esports is this thing. Yeah, oh, I love it, man. It's my favorite thing. I'm watching it all the time. It's a way to set yourself apart from other people, to be in this niche little group and to be cool and these sorts of. There's a lot of these implications flying around. In that particular sense, that's what's interesting, is that I've noticed a lot of the people in terms of fans, and even some pros and casters, the ones that go the hardest at trying to convince you they're passionate tend to be the newer ones. And what's funny is they might be passionate initially. They might have an enthusiasm for it, like a novelty to it. They might have an excitement because they're brand new to it. But they go so hard at trying to convince you that they're super hardcore into it that they actually go a bit far, and almost to a little bit of a disingenuous level. Like they try to convince you that they're way more into it, that they know more about it, they're more passionate, they're more excited than actually maybe they are. Like I've seen examples where, probably the craziest example ever was when Flash, the greatest Brood War player ever, who at the end of Brood War, so like around like late 2011 going into early 2012, was a god at the game, was like almost unbeatable. He was this good at the game, and his pedigree was impeccable at this point. The number of tournaments he'd won, the number of high placings, the level he'd taken all matchups to. I could understand why if someone followed Brood War, they would worship Flash. He really was. His nickname was God. He really was a god. He was that good. But when he first came into StarCraft 2, before he'd ever even played StarCraft 2 properly, they had this MLG exhibition tournament where they flew over 8 Kesper players. It was like Bisu, Stork, I think Jadon maybe, Fantasy, Flash. These players were all there. Maybe Zhangbi as well, maybe C. I think these might be the 8 players. They flew these players over to play this little exhibition tournament. And at the time, StarCraft 2, this is 2012, was going gangbusters. It was still doing really well. And so all these people came to MLG who were StarCraft 2 fans, and they all lined up, and there were these queues that went ages to come and get signatures from Flash and these players. And the number of people posting in Reddit threads about it and going up to Flash in real life and telling Flash, oh, I'm your biggest fan. I'm like, oh man, I love your play. You're my favourite player. And actually, I even spoke to some of these people and saw some of these people say within their comments, with no self-awareness, they even admitted they'd never watched Flash play Brood War, or they'd watched him play like 5 games of Brood War ever. Yet the main reason at that point in time, since he hasn't even played StarCraft 2 yet, to be the biggest fan of Flash, to be that into it, to be passionate, is the fact that you've watched lots of Brood War. That's what makes you worship this guy. You've seen what's so incredible, what's so special about it. And listen, I realise people are naive, people are young, people just, they get a little bit jazzed up, maybe they get carried away with themselves. But you can see that there's something extra that they're wanting to do there. There's something strange about how they're wanting to convince this person, like, oh, I'm your biggest fan. Well, actually, they don't even particularly know much about this person. Also, what do they gain from saying that? Well, they want him to think, oh, wow, really, this Western guy's... See, there's a validation, there's a recognition they want from it. It's not just their awesome internal passion that they want to just share with the world. There's something a little bit extra going on there. And in terms of... I'll give you an example that I've given to friends of mine when I've talked about this topic in the past. It reminds me of how people will act when they're a teenager, because a lot of this behaviour is immature in as much as it's how, on an individual level, people will act as a teenager and then going into early adulthood. But as a scene, because the scene is so young, the scene's sort of at a teenage level in this sense where it's a bit confused about where it's going and what the future is and what's it supposed to be building on from the past and what's it supposed to take from the past and carry through, and who is it as a scene, is it this, is it that, and have they changed minds over certain things? And so when people are just teenagers, they'll often get into a certain type of music. And now the great examples here, the 2 obvious ones that come to mind, maybe this will age me that I say these 2 examples, would be goth music and punk music. And when people are like 14 or 15 and they get super into one of these types of music, what they tend to do is they don't just get, listen, I've no doubt they hear the music and they go, hey, it's cool, I like that, I'm into that, something different about that. But rather than just go from that and build off it and listen to more music, get to talk to more people, a lot of them will dive straight in the fucking deep end, go straight to the other end from being total noobs who know nothing about it, to like a month later, they have posters of it all over their wall. They're dressing, this is the reason I picked goth and punk music, they're dressing like the most hardcore, like full-on goth, black makeup everywhere, piercings, all sorts of shit, like fucking black leather clothing all over the place, and they're like going around like, I'm so hardcore, yeah, I love goth music or whatever. And then if they're a punk, they've got the full mohawk with the red hair and all the craziest shit, right? And they'll tell you, I live for punk music. It's just my life, man. It's my philosophy. And yet you sit some of these people down because they're just young people and they're naive and they're still figuring out who they are in the world and they're a little bit insecure, perhaps. You talk to them about punk music, and listen, I've never dressed as a goth, I've never dressed as a punk, but I've liked music definitely in the punk genre, known quite a lot of the more independent punk music and punk music that goes years back. I've enjoyed some of the music, I just never felt the need to dress up, etc. So you talk to them about like, oh cool, what do you think of this one? Do you know this band? And sometimes the band that they have all the posters of, they've only just heard like the newest CD of or like a couple of tracks of, and they've never heard this stuff before, and they haven't heard of this other band that's that's pretty famous band. I'm pretty sure you'd like that. Oh right, no, I haven't heard that yet. And so what you quickly realise is a lot of this stuff, I've no doubt they do like the music, etc., but there's a facade to it. There's an element where they're trying to convince the world that they're something, maybe to convince themselves that they are it, or to ask for the validation of like, I'm a different person, I'm unique, like, hey, don't box me in, man, I'm like this, like, I'm not like everyone else. Whatever the reasons are, you can see that there's something more going on there. And so in League of Legends, to give you an example, League of Legends, probably the best example, is I've brought this stat a million times on talk shows I've been on, but if you ever see the statistical breakdown of when people got into League of Legends, because the game keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, it's like every year, most people got in within that year or within the last 6 months. That's when most people came into the game. Yet, if you ever see the way people talk about someone like Big Fat LP on Reddit, you would think that they'd all been around since like 2009 or 2010. Well, 2010, 2011 is more his era. 2010, 2011, he was a really good player. He was already starting to drop off towards the end of 2011. 2012 was when he became quite average as a pro. 2013, he was terrible. So the majority of people didn't even see when he was terrible. And then a lot of them maybe a few of them saw when he'd already dropped off, and almost none of the people who can now be commenting really did watch him when he was like a really good player. What's happening is they've heard the stories of when he was good, or maybe they've seen a bit now and they've got a cool personality and they've heard these aspects and think, wow, that's the sort of cool guy I would have been in 2000. And listen, it's perfectly legitimate to go back in time and to look at all stuff. If you do, although I guess a lot of these people aren't actually, first of all, the VODs that exist, but it's perfectly legitimate to go back and to get into something. But again, this is something where it's the idea that they're being sold, that this is a cool thing and it's a way to identify myself. Oh, you like porn, do you now? I'm more of a big fat LP kind of, you know what I mean? It's like that sort of a thing. It's a way to be different. It's a way to do all these things to get validation in some weird way. This, in terms also of the way people do this passionate thing, it shows itself in a really weird way because they say they're so passionate about it. And so you think they'd love it how it is now, and they've loved the way things were in the past, and they love just what's happening now. I want more of it and I want to see more of it. And yet there's this underlying desperation that esports and League of Legends has to be bigger. Or CS has to be bigger, or StarCraft has to be bigger. It has to be recognized by more external entities. Oh, did the New York Times say something about Star? Oh my God. Did NBC? Oh, did Real Sports and HBO say something? Oh, that's amazing. Wow, esports is getting bigger. Now people are going to validate me. And now my family won't think I'm a loser. And now my girlfriend will know that I'm doing something cool and I'm not just stuck in my bedroom on my own. All these weird things of like political, socio concepts that really shouldn't really be related to if you think this game and this competitions around games are awesome and you just really love on them. Like, that's kind of a side issue, right? There's a little circus off here that's really not that big a deal, and sometimes is kind of a distraction from the main aspect, if you ask me. In terms of the different sets of people who are this passionate about esports, but in kind of a bit of a suspect way, you get these casters who come into casting and they say they're super passionate about, they love the game and they're so into it, and yet from behind the scenes, I know some of them who, after even only a year and a half of casting all these games, I've actually kind of lost interest in it. They're doing it as a job now. They're doing it for the financial reasons. They're doing it because they're famous. They're doing it for all these different reasons. Suddenly, they're not researching this player and going super into detail and getting extra stuff and watching him in solo queue. Suddenly, they're not watching games from other leagues unless it's a couple of games they have to do as homework before a big tournament. These guys who say they're super passionate, actually, the passion seems to have dried up a little bit. Where's it gone, guys? I thought you were super passionate about it. Now then, I know cases there are. Like, I could give you an example of a guy where... Actually, I won't say who it is and I won't say the game, but in a particular game, there's a guy where he's done 1 million games in this game and he is super passionate. He does watch loads of games and he will watch as many as he can and he'll talk to players and he seems just as passionate now as he was when the game first came out. And so listen, I realise there are people who are legitimate in that way, but unfortunately, because this vernacular of everyone saying they're passionate all around, it's actually hard to tell who those people are until you have a little bit more subtlety and you kind of look at it in this way I do to deduce people's motivations for saying things. In terms of pro players, the number of players who tell you like, oh yeah, esports is my job. And I'm like, no, esports isn't just my job, man. It's my life. Like, it's everything. My dream is esports. I want to do this. Yet that player gets big enough that suddenly he's not just a nerd and now he has a girlfriend. He has a hot girlfriend. The number of fucking players their motivation magically withers as if drained away from them just by being around a woman, like, or other things that might happen with women. The number of these guys who magically lose all their motivation and just go to fucking pot because they have the attentions of a girl there is unreal. Like, mate, how passionate were you about that thing? Because I tell you what, some guy like a Kobe Bryant guy who's super passionate about basketball, it doesn't matter who he's with as a woman. His mind still, there's a degree to which it's like, sorry, love, I love you, but you're number 2 after basketball. That's what I'm obsessed with, mate. That's like the degree to what's going on. I don't think he calls on wife mate or whatever, but I would. So there are players, though, I've known. So there's the ones who lose motivation because of girls. There's the ones who get success and lose motivation. Like, oh, well, I've succeeded now. What would I keep doing? Well, I thought you were passionate about the game, man. You really loved it and you just wanted to play it. In which case, you keep going, be more successful. Have a thirst and appetite for success. Never let it end. Keep going and going and go until you've given your last. Oh, you're not going to. Oh, you're giving up already. Ah, you're just going to coast this season. And just wait till the world's like, come on, man. This is a fucking joke. You're not that passionate at all. You were obviously passionate to the game for a while. It was fun, and then apparently you're more into money now, or you're more into just success or whatever. Likewise, you win money, you're in a situation where you're not as hungry suddenly. If you're really passionate, I think you would still be as hungry. You lose this motivation. Now, again, as a player, actually, I think this is fairly on record, so I'll give this player directly as an example. Froggen, one of the things I've always respected to him, aside from how complete his game is and how good he is at all these different aspects, is that this guy really loves League of Legends. Like, he's at that sort of crazy level that some of these people in other sports, like Michael Jordan, etc., are about their sport that makes them obsessive. There have been times in off seasons where, like, for example, when Froggen didn't go to Worlds at season 3, there'd be like times in the off season where, in theory, he could have waited 2 weeks, a month, just worked his way back into playing. Where during his off season part, where he didn't have to play for anyone, He was playing League of Legends for fun, as in the most fun thing to do in the world to him was still to play League of Legends 2 to 3 years into a hardcore career of having played almost every single day. That's a guy who is passionate just about League of Legends, and then the esports side, even more so, to play solo queue, to play with a team, to play scrim, to think about the game. This is a guy who really is passionate, and so when some of these other people say their motivation's fallen off, again, I'm sorry, it makes me a bit suspect as to where your passions were initially. What motivation did you initially have? Why were you motivated? What's gotten to you that suddenly drained you of this motivation? In terms of fans, the fans who will go so hardcore in those first 3 to 6 months telling you they love the game, it's awesome, and then suddenly they'll start using these weird things, like they'll say, I'm bored with it now, like it's always the same play. Like that's the thing, it always manifests in like they need it to be bigger, otherwise it's not fun anymore, it's not interesting. I've lost interest now. They need it to be different champions. If a great team, a godlike team, whatever it was, Moscow 5, SK Telecom, World Elite, all these teams dominate, they're like, bored of that, it's not interested. Those are the most fucking interesting periods where a godlike team figures the game out and is able to destroy even other amazing teams with their understanding of the strategy and their dominance in it. That's fucking incredible. That's masterpiece. That's the highest level of art in esports, and you're bored by that, then I don't think esports is for you, man. I don't think this game's for you. I don't think you're actually that passionate about it. You apparently want a fireworks show of different crazy things happening that you don't know, I've got surprises there. And I'd rather some shitter team that I've never heard of just won the event out of nowhere than a really dominant team could display their complete mastery of the metagame. And as should go on in the progression of things, people try to catch up, but they can't, and that team stays ahead. I think there's something wrong if you're not that into it. I wonder how passionate you are about esports if you say that, in fact. Likewise, there has to be a bigger prize purse. Are you fucking kidding me? As long as the good enough teams turn up, play each other, and are all into motivated and playing each other, I could give a fuck less if they win $10 or $1 million. Beyond a certain point, it doesn't affect it. $100,000 first place, $1 million first place. The really hardcore competitors are going to play exactly the same for the 100K as for the million. Now, whether they'll practice differently or whatever, we can all debate that, but I don't think so from my experience, seeing people in CS who practice hardcore for like 20K first place. So I think that's overblown. And when fans get too into that stuff about the prize pool, I get a bit skeptical again. Like, what's really motivating? You want some you get a hard on for an extra zero on a check that you don't even get to have, that some other guy who's from Korea who you'll never meet gets to deposit in his bank. Are you fucking kidding me? That's what you get passionate about, is it? In terms of casters, I'll tell you a crazy story for this one, I definitely won't reveal any names. First of all, you might not even know these people, and it's just ridiculous, this story anyway. So I was once in a situation a few years back when I was with a group of casters, and I knew these people. I'd known them I didn't know them super well. Well, first of all, not many people get to know me super well, just my personality and my lone wolf. But I knew these people like for a couple of years for the scene, and they knew me, and we knew of each other, but we never got really to know each other a lot. So we were talking once. We were discussing esports in different games and what we thought was cool and memories. And then one of them, bizarrely, just turns to me at one point and goes, "So do you love esports?" And I was like, well, I mean, I've been around it for like many, many years now. I've seen a lot of esports. Like, I've always found a way to keep motivated and to find like new, interesting things to keep me. And he goes, yeah. But do you love esports? And I said, well, I mean, love is like a kind of a strange word to use in that sense, because like I like really high level esports. Like, I get motivated when there's a cool story and a history to it. He goes, no, but do you love it? And the way he kept asking me in that weird way over and over again was almost like I was in a fucking cult, and like, to pass like level 7 initiation, I had to be like, I promise that I love esports and it is in my heart always, and here is the sign of esports, this is the E, and then like whatever the fuck he wanted me to do. And apparently if I hadn't even said all that stuff, that actually sounds a lot more articulate for someone who is passionate about esports, like the history, and I managed to find new ways to change my motivations and what interests me in it. Instead, if I'd have just said from the beginning, I love esports, mate, he'd have just been like, great, welcome to the welcome to esports. Let's give each other the esports hug. Like, what the fuck's going on there? That's sinister as fuck. And by the way, it should go without saying, I love Brood War. I'm really passionate about it. I still watch Brood War every single week of my life. I go watch classic series. I watch the newer games that are off streams. I love Quake. I go and watch the old finals. I go and think about them. I read old interviews. These guys who were asking if I love esports and were in a particular couple of games at the time, they don't work in those games anymore. They haven't watched those games in years. Some of those games are even still played. They don't give a fuck. They don't ever watch them. They're bored. They're not interested. They're into other stuff that's bigger or better. Whatever the scenario. You see what I mean? It was actually suspect on their behalf, the way they were trying to portray it, as like they were so passionate. The reason I bring all this up is because passion and motivation, I feel like, are really misunderstood qualities, because I don't get this idea that like Passion and motivation are external, and when something cool's happening in your life, it comes into you and makes you passionate and makes you motivated. To me, passion and motivation are internally generated qualities that come from you and the core of your being and what you're all about and what excites you and what makes you who you are as a person. And then you find the things externally that it reaches out to and connects with, and that's when you're passionate and you're motivated and all the rest of it. So to me, if you're a really passionate person, it's self-regenerating. You never have to worry about it going away. If I wake up tomorrow, I'm never going to be bored with esports and bored with League of Legends, bored with StarCraft 2, because there'll always be some other storyline, some other history aspect that really excites me, that I connect with externally from what I like as a person and what I'm all about. Everything in life. I've had a lot of times where I never actually took time off esports, but I took time off in as much as I wasn't working actively. I'd still watch it, but then I'd do other things in my life. I'd be reading books, or I'd be going on adventures around the world. I'd be getting into other really arcane topics like medieval alchemy or whatever. And what's funny is every single other topic I went into, even really abstract ones like that, I'd immediately find myself relating esports concepts and things I loved about esports, finding aspects there that related back in. And it would make me loop it back into esports and think of it in a new way, in a new idea, and something I could apply there. And what I realized was the reason why I would never get bored of esports is because the things that I was interested in, I was interested in universally in the world, and would always loop back into esports. So it would always be self-regenerating. It would always be revitalizing. It would never be an end point where I'd mastered it, completed it, it was over, it wasn't interesting anymore. I've got a story for you, an anecdote. And the problem with this anecdote, what makes it great, I actually love stories that are apocryphal. Like they just serve a great purpose, but maybe they weren't true, in fact. Here's the problem with this story, is that I've tried fucking Googling it over the years and I could never find it. And also, bizarrely, this is unusual for me, I can't remember what book I read it in. But I read a story that goes along these lines. And I know some of these details will probably be wrong, but for the sake of the story, just imagine it was a totally made up story and we'll just hear it like this. So Bobby Fischer, one of the greatest chess players of all time. Some people think he's the best, actually. This American guy who became a world champion around, I think it was like the 60s was when he became a world champion. So if you remember, back in 1962 was like the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is where I think the details might be wrong, but the story I think holds. I read this story that he was at some sort of chess tournament, where they got all these great chess players and they were all sort of locked away in this area playing, and they'd be playing the matches, and then the downtime between the matches, something like the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on. That might not be right because the dates might be off, and I tried searching, I can't find shit for it, but it was sometime around some political crisis was going on. Because you have to remember, at the time, a lot of this chess was Bobby Fischer, the American, versus all these amazing Soviet players, and the Cold War was going on. So supposedly in the downtime, all these players start talking about all this shit about the political stuff, oh, what do you think that means in terms of that? And oh, what do you think this country will do? And what's going on with this over here? And should we be worried? And apparently they're all talking like this, And then in the anecdote, whether it's true or not, Bobby Fischer suddenly just sort of shouts out what the fuck does this have to do with chess? And what's funny is everyone in this room is in theory obsessed with chess. Their whole life's about chess. They know everything about chess. But everyone in this room looks to him. And the reason this story is retold, or was wherever I fucking heard it, was as if to suggest wow, how fucking crazy is Bobby Fischer, man? That guy's out of control. What the fuck? Talking about chess? We're talking about something important like missiles or whatever, political shit. What's funny is I took totally the other interpretation of that. I actually thought to myself, wow, Bobby Fischer really was totally in love with chess. He was obsessed with chess. Actually, to him, yeah, all that stuff about some political stuff is some cool thing off in a distance that probably doesn't even affect him. But chess is what he's into right now. Chess is what he's thinking about. Chess is what he's trying to do. Chess is what he's here with these other people to do and think about and talk about and try and play. So actually, it's astounding to him that, how long is this conversation about the thing not to do with what we're all supposed to care and love and be totally into going to go on for, mate? Let's fucking get back to that. That's what we're here for, right? So I took it in a totally different way, and that's how I kind of interpreted it. So I think I've kind of given you a different perspective on this passion issue, the cult of passion, as I've kind of termed it here. And as I say, I get that, listen, people have different interests in these things. You don't have to be super into it. You don't even have to be into it. You can have your 6 months where it's cool. You can have a year where it's cool. You can lose interest. These are all fine. I'm just talking about the way it's portrayed, the way people try to convince, the way they go above and beyond. And you'd think there was 2 million people who were always in esports all these years and they were going to be in it 25 years. Then a year later, they're not into it and they get bored with this game and their star player leaves, so they stop and this player starts losing. And then this champion's been dominant for too long and I don't want to see Sue in 4 finals of GSL, and whatever the story is, Flash won too many Brood War titles. Whatever it is, I just get a bit skeptical, because I think if you actually are that passionate, if you are that into it, if you are that motivated, it's revitalizing, it's internal. You don't have to sell people on it. It'll be innate. You'll be able to see just from the way the person talks about it, wow, they really love that thing, they're obsessed with that, that's what they're all about. You don't have to do the hard sell on us, guys.